Take two. Mio and MMA podcast talking about UFC Calvin Kattar versus Arnold Allen. I got halfway through this card on a first breakdown and had massive hiccups. So that was the MMA's God's way of telling me I hadn't done a good job. You need to go back. You need to do it again, and you need to make it better, bigger. Which is going to be hard to do because this card... So I get that there's a differentiation in the product. Pay-per-views are the big cards. Fight nights are, you're going to get one big main event. You might get a good co-main event. And then you're going to get a lot of filler. My problem with this card is that the filler is pretty bad. Because normally with the filler, you've got prospects making their way up. And we have a little bit of that. We have the debut of Carlos Mata, the effective debut of Christian Rodriguez, who fought Jonathan Pierce already, but that really shouldn't count because Pierce is a lightweight masquerading as a featherweight, and Rodriguez was a bantamweight masquerading as a featherweight. So that wasn't really a fair fight. And then you've got Chase Hooper, who's been around a while, but is still super young. You've got, I guess Phil Haas and Roman Dolidze are still prospects, maybe? And like Trayshawn Gore and Waldo Cortez Acosta, but they're also in like exceptionally uninteresting matches that are not necessarily what I want to see them doing. Like I don't really want to see Mata fight Cody Durden. I don't really want to see Chase Hooper fight Steve Garcia. I really don't want to see Jung Young Park fight Joseph Holmes. So there's a number of like, it's not that they're filler. It's not that they're not high profile. It's not that they're not particularly meaningful. It's that they're fighter A versus fighter B in a combination that to me doesn't inspire much. And that is this card from the co-main event down. Calvin Kattar versus Arnold Allen. Main event. Fantastic main event here. You've got a mirror matchup of two guys who are high-volume boxers, essentially, when it comes down to it. Like, what they really want to do is box. They can grapple. They can strike in other ways, etc. But they want to just have like a high-volume, high-octane boxing match. And they're not necessarily big finishers. They have a combined 5 TKOs in the UFC between them. A lot of those TKOs are fights that really had more to do with the fragility at the time and place of their opponent than their own potency. I have more faith in Calvin Kattar and his overall package. He's a guy who can fight comfortably on the back foot and comfortably pressure. Really nothing puts him off his game. I mean, getting his ass handed to him on a platter by Max Holloway did not dissuade him from being Calvin Kattar. That being said, he is coming off of a bad performance against Josh Emmett. One that you could easily think he won. And easily score from him because I expect a 3-2 scoring either way is perfectly acceptable, and even a 4-1 scoring for Kattar as possible for that fight. But it was a fight where he was lured into allowing Emmett to set the pace, allowing Emmett to bring us down from that 150 strikes landed, 200 strikes landed pace that you do see from Calvin Kattar into something much lower. I mean, like the fact that he landed more strikes against Max Holloway than against Josh Emmett, I think really does have to, make you question of like, are we seeing Kattar kind of on the downturn? He is 34 years old. He is 6 years older with 10 more fights than Arnold Allen. So is Arnold Allen the guy coming up, catching Kattar at the right time as Kattar comes down? Before Kattar's lost all value because, still super durable, amazingly tough, still very game. Still very interesting, but it does feel like he's on the wrong side of the career trajectory, and Allen is still getting better. I think the Kattar will allow Arnold Allen, not necessarily allow, but be unable to stop Arnold Allen from getting, one, on the front foot, and two, setting the pace, setting the defining features of the fight. And that's why I got to take out Arnold Allen to win. It just feels like, we're just faded enough with Kattar that this is still a very interesting fight, but it's one in which I think the door for him to win the fight has become incredibly small. I don't think he can necessarily keep up with Allen anymore. I don't necessarily think he can be chaotic, creative, and multidimensional enough to put Allen off of his game. And it's just a question of mileage. I'm going with Arnold Allen by decision. He is the very, very slight favorite. I checked the betting odds here, minus 113 to minus 107. So we're talking about as close as betting odds, about as close to even money as you can get for a UFC fight. Tim Means versus Max Griffin. This is another case of one where maybe Griffin's caught Means at the right time, because I think in their primes, I would have taken Tim Means. No questions asked, no problem. I think he's the higher volume striker. I think he's the more creative striker. I think he puts things in combinations better, even if Max Griffin does have very, very pretty single strikes. And is very fast, very strong, very physical. He's always a guy that I wish had hooked up with an actually decent team at some point, like after the Mike Perry win, because I think there was a ton of untapped potential in Max Griffin. And now he's 36 years old. Means is 38, so he's the younger fighter here, but he is not a young fighter by any means. And I think Griffin is left completely devoid of ways to define a fight. He almost always gets stuck having the fight that his opponent wants. And if that's a fight that he can still win, so much the better. But when your best win is Mike Perry, do I trust you to go out there with Tim Means, have the pocket exchanges that Means wants, have the clinch exchanges that Means is going to want, and still win that fight? And I don't. It wouldn't surprise me if Griffin goes out there and absolutely just blows Means out of the water, because we're dealing with a 38-year-old Tim Means. It's coming. There's going to be a fight someday down the line, because I guarantee you Tim Means will fight to this point where he just falls apart. Maybe not even because of anything the opponent is doing, but because the opponent comes out there and just has a game and his body can't keep up with it anymore. And it could be this one, but I am going to go with Tim Means. Going to bet the Dirty Bird. He is a plus 155 underdog, minus 180 on Max Griffin. So still tight lines, and I don't begrudge Max being the favorite at all. Waldo Cortez Acosta, Jared Vanderhaar. So Waldo is LFA heavyweight champion, I believe still. He may have been stripped of the belt. They do tend to strip you if you go to the UFC, because you're not coming back. Or at least you're not coming back for a long enough time that they're going to want to crown a different champion. And Jared Vanderhaar is quite bad. He's lost 4 in a row. Particularly his last 2 are incredibly damning, because you lose to Alexei Olenek by willfully grappling with Alexei Olenek, and you lose to Chase Sherman by willfully striking with Chase Sherman. 2 guys who have a very narrowly defined skill set, and you couldn't just stay away from that skill set, which in theory Vanderhaar has the ability to do, because he's probably a better wrestler than both of them. So this puts me in a weird case that I have zero faith in either of these guys to win this fight. In Waldo's case, I think while he is undefeated, it's really just been that for a regional heavyweight, he, 1, has polished enough boxing that he can hurt people. 2, he has good cardio for a heavyweight and outlasts people because they get tired. The Derek Weaver fight and the Thomas Peterson fight are great examples of this, of fights that, to be honest, I don't even really think he was necessarily winning. I think he was losing to Peterson. I think he was beating Weaver because Weaver Weaver had a clinch at one point in the fight with him and like just basically fell on his back. But the key is that he ended up stopping them when they just got tired. It wasn't any dynamite in his punches. It wasn't any potent venom in his game. It was just, you got tired. I'm not tired. And I'm going to finish you. And say what you want about Vanderhoff. And I said plenty. Fight IQ is terrible. He's slow. He's lumbering. He's got cardio. And he's got durability. And he's got wrestling. Like there is nothing that Thomas Peterson did to Vanderhoff for 2 rounds, or did to Waldo Cortez Acosta for 2 rounds that Jared Vanderhoff can't replicate. That Jared Vanderhoff can't take his Team Quest prototypical style of, I am a wrestler. I've learned how to put a boxing game on top of that. I can clinch fight. I'm pretty tough. I have a little bit of power. I have some deceptive moments of speed. And I'm going to go out there and kind of make it a hard fight for you. Because there is no such thing as an easy fight with Vanderhoff. He's not a guy who just goes out there and gets can opened. But he's not very good. And like I said, Waldo Cortez Acosta, also not very good. And not very well structured, because I don't even think he's that polished of a boxer. And his kicking game, just stop. Just stop. Because when he kicks, it's naked, it's obvious. He is going to get punished at some point in his career exceptionally hard for that. I've got to go with Vanderhoff by decision. But like, this is a perfect example of, this is a fight where like, I don't even think this is a good use of Waldo Cortez Acosta. Let's say that like he is a prospect. If he beats Vanderhoff, is that interesting? If he loses to Vanderhoff, how is that not just the biggest buzzsaw through? Because Vanderhoff's lost 4 in a row. Like, even the betting odds have Acosta as a favorite, minus 192 to plus 167. But even that doesn't suggest that there's a tremendous amount of faith in Acosta. So there you go. Speaking of guys who probably just shouldn't be in the UFC, 3-2 Tresean Gore versus Josh Fremd. I think the book on Gore is pretty well written at this point. He's strong, he's explosive, he's fast, he's powerful. He has all the physical tools to be a top-notch fighter, although I think he is a little bit short to be at middleweight. Like, feels like he probably physically fits more in at welterweight. I think. Am I just thinking he's way smaller than he is? This is possible. This is entirely possible that I'm just thinking Gore is way smaller. He's 6 foot. Okay. Maybe I'm wrong. I still feel like 6 feet is more welterweight, but we'll roll. We'll roll with it. We'll roll with the goods. I don't see how he beats Josh Fremd. Fremd is the opposite of him in the sense that beyond being a 6'4" middleweight, there's nothing physically impressive about him. Not particularly coordinated, not particularly fast, not particularly hard hitting, not particularly strong, but he has a game that's well put together, well honed. It's got volume. It's got moment to moment winning ability. It's got creativity. He can vary up his pace a little bit, whereas Gore, everything is the same pace, the same kind of basic bare bones combo, or couple of combos. He's got maybe like 3 combos that he throws kind of at all times, and it is super low volume. So I got to go Fremd by decision. He's a minus 143 favorite to a plus 123 Gore underdog. Gore should be a bigger underdog. This guy has shown no ability to actually be a UFC caliber fighter. Like, I understand that I didn't watch Tough, and he made the finals of Tough. I understand that he had to show something there. But I'm completely uninterested in it. In no way am I interested in it. What did he do in Tough? He beat Ryder Newman and Gilbert Urbina. No. I feel like he should have just been cut right after the season. I don't know. I don't know. No, I've got nothing. I've got honestly nothing. Alrighty, so let's keep rolling on down here. Dustin Jacoby versus Khalil Roundtree. Okay, this is pretty interesting. Two guys that are amongst the better strikers at 205, although in Jacoby's case, that's actually being pretty technical, having like a good jab and hook game, good low kicks, kicks to the body nicely. When you don't threaten him with wrestling, he can be pretty high paced, pretty volume happy. And in Roundtree's case, there is definitely technique to him, but he's like more of a raw power striker. Like he hits very hard, very explosively. But he can easily be lured into like just not being definitive about a fight. But he did knock out Gokhan Saki. So that's always the problem whenever we're talking about it. He knocked out Gokhan Saki and lost a decision in Marcin Prachnio. How do you have a career like that? How does that happen? I'm going with Jacoby. I think he's the better. All of this has led me to say he's the better striker. I think he's better at the B game of MMA that both of them have. The better grappler, the better game planner, more creative, willing to throw at higher volume. So yeah, I think he's got this one. He's a minus 163 favorite, plus 143 on Roundtree. And then we go to Roman Dolidze versus Phil Hawes. Back to the middleweight division. My incredible hang up on this is that there is one definitive area where Dolidze can beat Hawes probably, and that is if he could force a clinch with him. We saw both in the Daukaus fight and the Leandro Staropoli. There you go, last name. The Argentinian guy. That Dolidze's got an exceptionally powerful clinch game. He works good knees there. He can finish fights there, like he did finish Daukaus there. And that's pretty scary against Phil Hawes, who's a guy who is not big for the division. 6 feet tall is not bad, but 6 feet tall, relatively slim build. I am gambling that Hawes has good enough footwork, because he's been developing pretty good footwork. Like he avoided the clinch entirely with Deron Winn, but of course, the difference between Deron Winn and Roman Dolidze is 8 inches of height. So that's obviously a bit of damning with faint praise. But he's developing a reasonably good striking game. He's got the athleticism for it. He's explosive. He's fast. Probably going to be using that a lot during this card. Those two adjectives. And I don't think Dolidze has a really good idea of how to strike at range, because Dolidze's career has been hallmarked by people that weren't that were willing to clinch with him. That either were a Kyle Daukaus who kind of feels like he has to beat you everywhere, or a John Allen who doesn't really have a functional game to stay away from you, or a Kadis Ibrahimovic or Ibrahimov who is kind of like the same thing. Like he needs the clinch. And then like Staropoli is just, I don't even know how to describe the problems with Staropoli. I also do worry about Dolidze just on a health level, because he's pulled out of fights with Daukaus and with Brendan Allen due to essentially COVID problems. I don't know if he's an anti-COVID vaxxer or whatever, but he feels like a guy who probably would be. And as a result, I always have that nervousness. There's a lot of red flags about Dolidze, honestly. He may be like my least liked fighter in the UFC. But anyways, and it's not a political thing. Like I feel like as a person, he's just kind of terrible. I'm going to go with Phil Hawes. I'm going to go with the idea that Hawes is well coached. He's at a good team. And the idea of someone that you just have to avoid letting apply a power clinch game to you should be something that Killcliff FC, with the physical ability of Phil Hawes, can do. But maybe not. What is it? What's the reach in this fight? He's got 1.5 inches in reach on Dolidze. So yeah, he should. He's he's more athletic than Delineating. He's a faster athlete than Delineating. Delineating's athleticism is all just like kind of power. I feel like he should be able to skirt around this and get it done. He is the favorite, coming in at -170 to Delineating's +145. Also, you'll notice I hadn't picked a finish yet, and that's going to continue with Andrei Arlovski versus Marcos Rogerio de Lima, and I'm never going to pick de Lima to win a decision. So that should tell you that I'm picking Andrei Arlovski. I'm surprised Arlovski is one of the bigger underdogs here, +215 to -255. Now, to be clear, I understand Arlovski is, I said Tim Means was old. I said Calvin Kattar is on the way down. Arlovski is old and on the way down. But this is heavyweight. The regression is painfully slow in a lot of ways. It's why they hang around for as long as they do. And in the case of Marcos Rogerio de Lima, there's not a lot of nuance to his game. It's a power striking game into clinches and takedowns. Not because he's particularly even good at them, but because he doesn't have the cardio to really go anywhere. He's a guy who went to heavyweight just to get fat, it feels like. And he has really bad cardio. And I know. Andrei Arlovski is the legend. He is the dude in the Urban Dictionary next to glass chin or paper jaw or whatever. I guess glass jaw, paper chin. But I have never really subscribed to that theory. I have always thought that you have to hit Arlovski actually pretty damn hard to put him down, even in his worst days. And he's developed, for MMA and for heavyweight, competent defensive boxing in recent times. And I just expect him to be able to go out there, handle Lima for the time period that he's dangerous, let him gas out, and then just kind of out volume him the rest of the way to a decision. It's really way more about Lima than it is about any faith I have in Arlovski. And that's why this fight sucks. Probably is going to suck. Mind you, it could also be like a climactic first round KO. But like I've always said, this is that heavyweight always has that appeal. You put two big dudes north of 250 in the cage together, there's a chance you're going to get a violent knockout. And it doesn't really matter who they are. So you might as well give me someone who can be good without the violent knockout part. And this fight does not have that. Joe Holmes versus Jung Young Park. I don't know why Jung Young Park has this fight. Like, he just beat Eric Anders. Whether you believe he did or not, on paper he did. And he's fighting Joe Holmes, who, yes, is coming off a win over Alan Amedovski. But I think we're very, very, very aware that Alan Amedovski is not very good. I think that's hardwired into the UFC lexicon now that Alan Amedovski, not good. That Alan Amedovski, in his 4-fight run in the UFC, lost to Chris Yatko, was mauled by John Phillips, mauled by Joseph Holmes, and I'm sorry, Joe Pyfer fans. I feel like Joe Pyfer will probably end up in the same boat as Joe Holmes. And you mauled Alan Amedovski, who's a 5'10", not particularly thickly built middleweight. And it probably means very, very little. And that's where Joe Holmes is right now. Jung Young Park to win all day. Better boxer, better grappler, at least in a positional standpoint, wrestling standpoint. I will say Holmes does have some nice back takes. He's got that going for him. But I have to believe that it takes more than that to beat Jung Young Park. Chase Hooper versus Steve Garcia. By the way, plus 181 on Holmes, minus 211 on Park. Chase Hooper is one of the bigger favorites on this card against Steve Garcia, which is a bit weird because this fight does have an alarming amount of reminding me of the Steven Peterson fight, which Hooper lost on kind of the basis of old man strength more than anything else. Like, Hooper would get in trouble on the ground, or pardon me, Peterson would get in trouble on the ground with Hooper and then just kind of peel him off, just kind of be bigger, stronger. And I get that Hooper has fixed a lot of that. His fight with Felipe Colaros was very impressive. But you're still fighting a massive juggernaut of a man in Garcia. Like, Garcia is a guy who did not look out of place at 170 and is now down at 145. I'm still going to go with Hooper by decision or by submission because Garcia will expose himself to danger in a way that Peterson doesn't. If you need a kind of example of that, watching get rear naked choked by Elon Cruz is like a really good example of that. So I am going with Hooper. But it's kind of like this hopeful thing where like I'm hoping that the Hooper Kolaros fight was not an outlier, that it's this new thing that Hooper does look bigger, looks stronger, looks like he's trying to really add some bulk to his frame and make this work. And I appreciate that because there is no doubting his grappling chops, his creativity on the ground, his ability to threaten, top notch. From bottom or from top to take the back, it's all there. Like the stand-up is kind of bad, and the question was, can he get you down and hold you down? And he's trying to fix that, which I appreciate. And Garcia is bad, but there's a little bit of the Jared Vanderaa and Waldo Acosta-Cortez. Am I getting that right? Cortez Acosta, pardon me. Fight to it where like there might just be enough physicality and enough like baked in game of veteranness to Steve Garcia to win this fight. I'm just hoping not. And I guess the difference with the heavyweight fight is that I am picking Vanderaa and I actually kind of am hoping that Vanderaa wins. Whereas in this fight, like I am really hoping that Hooper wins. Cody Durden, Carlos Mata. This is another example of like kind of that same thing where like I want Mata to win. Part of it is my dislike for Durden, the xenophobic stuff, the just generally kind of boringness, the really illy timed, ineffective trash talk that he tends to employ. Like it just doesn't do it for me. And in Mata's case, like I really like the idea of his like creative, dynamic striking actually working. Like there's a ton of feigning movement to him, which I think Durden will bite on. He throws with good power, throws with good snap. I don't think he's an amazing finisher, but there's enough venom there. And Durden, it's kind of weird. Durden has never actually been finished with strikes, but he's been hurt a couple of times. So I'm just assuming that Mata can get the job done here, that he can hurt Durden and put him away. But there is like a solid chance that I've never seen Mata pressured with the competence and wrestling that Durden does bring to the table. Because like Durden is, like I said, a durable, pressure, grinding wrestler type. So like if he goes out there and just grinds on Mata, there might be a way to win. But I'm hoping Mata picks up the TKO. Josh Weems versus Christian Rodriguez. It's a fun fight, but it's not really a challenging fight. Like Rodriguez is in a weird spot where like in his debut, they gave him Jonathan Pierce. And Jonathan Pierce is a lightweight masquerading as a featherweight, and Rodriguez was a bantamweight masquerading as a featherweight. So there was essentially two weight classes in difference. And he lost, but it was a pretty exciting fight. He did some good things. And then made me chronically underrate Jonathan Pierce going forward, and I got embarrassed with Pierce's next fight against... was it Makwan Amirkhani? I think it was Makwan Amirkhani that Pierce fought after that. And it kind of suckered me into thinking that Amirkhani would win, and that did not happen. Rodriguez has a pretty venomous ground game. He's a very good scrambler. He'll threaten with guillotines and other chokes. He'll use the guillotine to create other opportunities as well. Like he has no wins by guillotine, despite looking like he has a really good guillotine. And of course, he's a Rufus Sports School fighter, which means everything you expect it to mean. Like a good, fundamental striking game with solidly put together stuff. Basically what they produce when they don't get Anthony Pettis or Tyron Woodley or Ben Askren. Where Pettis is like this weird, dynamic, flowing stuff that Rufus doesn't usually produce. And Woodley and Askren are just terrible. Josh Weems does not feel like a UFC caliber fighter. He's an exciting guy. Like I'm happy to see him here. He's wide open, as his nickname says. He's pretty fast, pretty explosive. He's creative striker, but he is very raw and is not at a gym. Like, I can literally not find what gym he even trains at. That's how, like, no name the gym is. So, obviously, I'm picking Rodriguez. I'm picking Rodriguez probably by TKO, but a submission is also on the table. Rodriguez has finishes from both ideas, but I think he's going to be more predominantly a striker. And, like, I don't necessarily know that he has the wrestling to take a grappling game to someone. It's just more of a defensive thing. And Weems will go for takedowns and stuff, but, like, he's content to have a ranged kickboxing fight. And I think Rodriguez will humor him basically on that and just take him apart. So I'm looking forward to that fight because I do think Rodriguez has a little something. But on the whole, like, well, case in point, I summarized this card in less than 30 minutes. I usually take 45 minutes to an hour. I understand there's only 11 fights here, but there was nothing super intriguing. I could have gone really deep into the main event, I suppose. But I just feel like the dynamic in that fight is kind of set forth. And I'm hoping I'm wrong, because, like, it'll be way more interesting if I'm wrong. Not necessarily on the winner, but, like, just that the fight has a little bit more of an ebb and flow, and that there's a real competition for who can lead the dance. But I don't feel like there will be. So, not a great card. Still could be good though. Still could be good. Like, there's stuff to watch here, but, like, if you're looking for, like, a pass card, this is probably it. What do they got up next here? They've got Tapology does not have the next UFC event for me. They got stuff up until January now. Whoa. What's the first card of December? Or pardon me, November. I'm a month ahead. Rodriguez versus Lemos. That should be a better card. Magny versus Rodriguez. Parisian versus Sherman. Ulanbekov versus Nate Maness. I like that fight, actually. Mark Madsen versus Grant Dawson. I like that fight. Jelton Almeida. Maxime Grishin. Derek Minner versus Nurembeke. Miranda Maverick versus Shanna Young. Mario Bautista, who I do really like, and I think other people really underrate. Polyana Viana, Junior Fry, and Jake Hadley's on the card. So yeah, that's a notably better card. That's a card where you have a bunch of, like, prospects trying to make their way in the world, and you've given them matchups that should actually be interesting. So, way better card. More of that, please. Less of this. So, without further ado, the Discord, the social media, so on, and other links to this podcast are above, to the right, to the left, and below, depending on where you're watching it. Please check it out. Your support is appreciated, and I'll see you after the fight card, where hopefully I'll be like, this was way better than I thought it was going to be. Hallelujah.